Today we're talking about Mars, and in particular, I wanted to stress on that a bottled up anger topic. There are many things around Mars in the chart, not just anger issues. But as a typical Scorpio, you probably already know me, I tend to concentrate more on the negative, how certain thing could come out as a problem for us if we're not dealing with it in the right way, according to the chart. But there are many positives, of course. Well, at the end of the day, with any position of any planet, what happens is that if we don't channel the energy in a positive, creative, reasonable way, the way that the chart is prescribing, that's when the issues are starting to come out, and we need to deal with different things that just require our attention because they're there. We cannot disregard them. Mars is probably the planet that is the most dangerous among the energies within us, because it can really go out of hand if we're not careful with it, and if we don't study what our own Marses are doing in the chart and what they want from us. Because Mars requires an outlet. It is the first outer planet, even though very often with astrologers we are counting it among the inner planets, together with Mercury, with Venus, because they're close to the Earth. But if you think about it, it's outside of the orbit of the Earth, the very first one, being a symbol of outward action, what we can do, what we can show, and how we can assert our will out there in the world as a separate individuality. Meeting the world. This is the function of Mars. But how well, how actively, and how productively we can meet the world, and what we can do in terms of winning what we are interested in, and being able to achieve on day-to-day basis our goals, depends on the activation of that planet. It is not worse or better in the different signs. Wherever you have your Mars in your birth chart, whatever sign we're talking about, there is a proper way to make the most of it and to really make it work well, even if it is in one of the signs where traditionally we expect Mars to be struggling, like Libra, Pisces, and I don't know, there are other combinations which we may claim that might lead to having a bit of a harder time with our Marses. But there is no good or bad Mars. It's a better or worse channeled Mars. It's got several very important functions that I just want to kind of mention quickly before we look at the charts of the. I will go quickly this time, because now I understand that a few of you have an interest into looking into your own chart and exploring things there. Certain topics will come out hopefully during that conversation, but Mars has maybe two main complementary but also quite opposite functions. The first one is self-protection, being alert to danger, to attacks from the environment or from other people, individualities, or things around us that might want to get into our way or be in competition with us for something. In these situations where we need to protect ourselves from danger, protect ourselves from aggression, from violence, from something unexpected that might come out, it is quite important for Mars to be able to sense and react quickly enough to the situation. But it's got another side of it, which is to do with this connection with the Sun and Venus, the conscious energies, that have already traversed some sort of guideline, a way of us to go forward towards our long-term goals and what we would like to achieve in the future, not just in this present moment, but making that happen here, now, and physically, tangibly. So Mars, like Venus, is an agent to the Sun and to the whole chart. Actually, Mars is out there to realize and to materialize what the conscious energies, the Sun and Venus, have already dreamed about or figured out as a desire towards something. And being a good promoter of our own interests is really the task of Mars. when you go out in the world, and with this function, we presumably go out in the world for the first time after certain processes have been boiling up internally through Mars, through Venus and Mercury, then we would inevitably meet some sort of opposition or the environment, and we would need to deal with it. How courageously and how willfully we are able to deal with whatever comes our way every next moment is again down to the position and the conditioning of the Mars in the chart. And now you need your Mars in order to be able to get to where you're going, because there are so many blockages to the desire to act and the desire to really assert yourself, because there might be other planets in the chart, and especially if Mars is connected to certain planets by aspect, which might counteract the desire to get out there, creating in us a psychological illusion that too much Mars might get us into trouble, or might make us appear too aggressive or too outgoing, which might not be the truth. So the first example, Miranda's chart, has something like this going on, and we'll see in a minute. But there are different situations. In some cases, we are talking about the ego assertion getting out of hand, whereby we are acting mostly through the Mars. And Mars is so busy doing different things and going forward, like imagining, for example, what we typically expect from an Aries energy is just to be moving forward without pausing to regroup or to think about the end purpose of that. So there is a certain disconnect between the sun, the goals of the sun that are a bit more stable and conscious and long-term, connected to meaning. So Mars might be just too rush and too, acting too quickly. So if this is the case, we have the disconnect between the ego of the moment and the so-called superego of the solar energy. Or it might be the other way around, that we have been suffering from this listlessness and maybe different forms of depression and lack of desire to participate in anything or to go out and do something for your own interest is another way of having Mars not functioning very well. So there is a problem, obviously, to be investigated. And by looking at the chart, I'm sure we can trace it. We can find out what might be going on and how we can work to maybe counteract this. Now, bottled up anger, if we are to go back to the topic of today, can be really dangerous. Mars needs a healthy, outgoing expression. It needs an outlet. And when we have not found and practiced that outlet actively now for a long time, there are things accumulating inside. There is frustration, there is irritation, which, if not voiced out or acted out, could lead to self-destructive behavior or very often illness. We know that we're most likely to connect psychosomatic illnesses to lunar issues, to emotions which are blocked in one way or another. But Mars is very close to the moon because, like the moon, it is an instinctual, direct energy. Again, very difficult to control and pin down, and one that is very easily activated in the moment when it's triggered. It is also a very powerful trigger by transit or progression. And when quite violent accidents come about, which appear to be coming out of nowhere and are extremely stressful and unexpected, leading to consequences that could be both physical and psychological. Very often, if we look at the moment chart of that situation, we can see that Mars has acted as some sort of activated bomb in the moment, and this bomb has exploded, even though on its own it cannot cause it. It's just a temporary activator of bottled up energies and issues which have been accumulating underneath the surface, probably for much longer, and are connected to other planets. So do you guys want to ask something or to comment something about Mars in general, some sort of something that you have been dealing with, so that we can then take a look at the examples and see if we can spot some sort of pattern that is recurring? What do you come to think about when you, I mean, what got you interested in general? Is it mostly exploring your own case and certain things that you have been dealing with in terms of Mars, or how have you been observing it yourself? No comments or
Well,
questions?
I can start since you're gonna have a look
Yes.
at my chart anyway, and yeah, the reason I signed up for this is very much what you were talking about. Yeah, I've I had an accident a few years back, and what you were just saying about Mars and accidents and bottled up anger, it just feels, it already feels like, like you're talking about my chart and my experience. So yeah, very much what I have been experiencing and still am experiencing, what you were talking about. So yeah.
Okay. Well, yes, I am very much having your chart in mind, referring to this thing in particular, because there are other areas which we can talk about in terms of Mars. Mars can by no means be always very active and very, kind of violently expressed in a chart. Very often, especially when it's retrograde, and Mars retrograde is a situation when Mars is usually opposite the Sun in a chart. I don't know if you've ever noticed that usually when Mars is opposite the Sun, it is retrograde. And there is kind of a toning down of the Martian expression. So too much Mars or too little Mars are equally possible to lead to violent outbursts and accidents. And you don't have to always be the one that's expressing that. But my belief is that we are always carrying our own Marses, even though Martian ego expression is usually linked mostly to male charts and to men and so on, the so-called male ego. By no means this doesn't apply to women, because we women also carry our Marses, as much as we are so prone to project them to other people in our lives, and mostly to the men that we are in some way linked to, related to. It's very typical. And I think not that I would like to blame anybody for something that might, obviously be a situation coming to you from outside and attacking you from outside, someone being violent to you, or an accident happening which you just seem to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I feel like we are doing a disservice to ourselves if we don't go a little deeper and use astrology, use the chart to see what might have made us prone to be in this situation. Not that we caused it, we didn't cause it, but we somehow had to, there is a meaning behind why we had to go through it. It's not just, something like a misfortune out of nowhere without any meaning. Something that victimizes us as hard as it could be. When we have a Martian issue in the chart and it gets expressed out there in one way or another, there is a way to work with this and to investigate what's really at the bottom of that, and how, as these things unfortunately happen to be recurring. If you are creating a situation consciously because of the way you are tuned into the energies according to your chart, then this might come out again and again and again. And somebody having suffered an accident or violence once might remain scared that the situation might repeat itself again, and for good reason, because we might still sense that whatever is underlying this situation is not totally cleared out, it's not totally worked with, and it would require another trigger, another sort of outlet. But I believe we can also, by knowing what's going on, we can reroute the energy. Everything in the chart can work very positively for us and is not supposed to get destructive if we are taking it, seeing it, and deciding how to mobilize that energy for something that we have designed, for something that we have decided we're going to do with it. And that way we give it a channel, which doesn't necessitate for the energy to unconsciously find its own channel through external outbursts. So yeah, I hope this could get a little bit more practical as we start looking at the charts. But let's get on with it and see Miranda's chart. We are, as I said today, it's a very interesting day because I know you were interested, Miranda, in the upcoming transit of Mars into Libra, because when you had your accident a few years ago, Mars was also in Libra. And I can see you've focused on the position of Mars. Did you study your own chart? I know that you're not a beginner. So did you study your own chart to trace this particular thing to Mars? Or is it just using the opportunity now that we're speaking about Mars today to see how it's related?
Yeah, the latter. And I would call myself a beginner. I've been a beginner for a long time, but I'm still, I still don't, I get distracted. I get sidetracked really easily. So my astrology path has been like everything else in my life, a lot of sidetracks.
Yeah.
But so I wouldn't know how to study. I can study my natal Mars, and I know where it is. And I can even I can study the natal and the transits a little bit, but like going back to 3 years ago when it happened, I wouldn't know what Mars was doing then.
Oh, okay.
I
Yes,
can.
we're going to look at that. I think you'll find it very interesting
Mhm.
because there is a lot going on, and it's so obvious that even if you are a beginner, you will be able to see that this is a signature which we cannot miss.
Mhm.
So I will show you how I do it. So I have not very much information about you, actually very little information. But when you mentioned the position of Mars in Libra, I looked at the chart, and your Mars is extremely crucial in the chart in general. I will show you all in a moment, so we can see. But it's not only that Mars is sensitive initially, but also at that time it was the perfect storm, especially in that particular date when the day that you gave me for the accident. That was a perfect storm because many things in transits and progressions together were kind of piling up
Mhm.
to points in your chart which were meant to trigger the Martian issues. So you are a very good example of our topic today, and thank you for volunteering because I keep being so amazed how every time we have a topic, people who join for some reason have something extremely relevant in their charts. So okay, sharing the screen now, and I will show you later the transits and progressions as well. But let's take a look at the birth chart as such for a minute, and you can spend a couple of minutes just taking a look at it. And I will talk you through what I see. Okay, so I hope you're not too distracted by all those tables and stuff around the chart. You can just take a look at the wheel. These are the aspects here summed up. And here you can see just the position of everything in signs and houses. You can ignore that one on this side because it's not so relevant at the moment. Right, so just a quick walk through now. You are a Libra Sun, which is teamed up with Mars in the chart. So this is an example of Mars being very close to the Sun. So they are, in a way, mixed together. And also, Uranus is part of the picture here. A lot of planets in Libra. The energy, which is considered to be the most anti-Martian because it's in the sign opposite to Aries. And all those planets are piled up around the descendant area or the Libra area of the chart, telling us many times Libra, Venus, cooperation, compromise, being in terms of relationships and kind of being together with others is a big topic. How to be together with others and what to do. So at the same time, ascendant in Aries. So the whole chart is being ruled by Mars in this case. So Mars rules the chart, but it's opposite the ascendant and it's in Libra. So already we can see a lot of contradictions around the Aries-Libra axis in the chart. And then I want to point your attention to this triangle here, the T-square between the planets in Libra, opposite Chiron in Aries, both squaring Saturn in Cancer. So that's a lot of tension, and Mars is a big part of that tension. So it's feeding the conflict on one side. Chiron in Aries on the ascendant is feeding the conflict on the other side. And then we have everything expressed through the Saturn down here in the beginning of the fifth house. We can say Saturn is end of the fourth, beginning of the fifth house, depending on the house system that you use to calculate the chart. But Saturn will be the point of expression of this tension that Mars is experiencing. Now, there is an exact square between Saturn and Mars. Can you see that? So they're both in 18 degrees, Cancer and Libra. So Mars being in a sign where we expect it not to feel, let's say, not typically Martian. I also have my Mars in Libra, and I don't think that Mars in Libra is a weak Mars by default. Again, as I said in the beginning, in any sign of the zodiac, Mars is equally strong. The sign shows us the way, the style of expression. So we are examining your Mars to find out how we can expect from you to be fighting your corner in life, or what is the manner in which you are going to be protecting your own interest or advocating your own interest out there, or what is the way you would be responding to aggressive action or some sort of challenge from outside, in what way you would be competing with others for things that you would like to gain or win. But Mars being located in the seventh house, along with the Sun and so many other things in this area, already makes me feel like it's very likely that you would have projected it. I don't know if this is the case, but it's very likely. You're one of those people that is more prone to projecting Mars to others. So I don't know whether we can expect Mars combined with Uranus, the planet of sudden change and unexpected shocking experiences, and also teamed up with the main solar vital energy, whether we can expect that to be more energized, more kind of bringing trouble from outside, from other people, maybe from the partner, maybe from people that you have connected with to do something together, like an initiative together, to join hands. But there is quite a lot of caution here with expect the unexpected through Mars, and maybe from other people if you don't own your own Mars. So I don't know you, I don't know how you've been working with your chart, but depending on the extent to which you're owning your own Mars is how much trouble you can expect from outside. This Libran combination here being exactly square to Saturn is another potential sign of inhibition or of struggle for Mars. Mars might be putting barriers to itself. You might be overly cautious or overly suspicious about things that might happen. You might not be willing to give a chance to certain things or people quickly enough because you're expecting trouble or expecting danger. Is that the right direction? What would you say? Have you ever experienced too much, maybe even paranoia about things, and related or unrelated to the accident, before the accident or after the accident, equally? How do you
Oh,
see
well,
that situation?
yeah, when you first said it, I was like, no, definitely not a paranoid person about, getting together and organizing things with people. But yeah, um, there has been a feeling of, especially since the accident, it's been kind of activated this feeling of I'm not safe in this physical world. So yeah, I guess you could call that paranoia, feeling of unsafety in this world. Yeah, especially since the accident, for sure.
Kind of getting a bit more watchful when you're out there and expecting that something might happen again. Do you want to say just a little bit, because the other people here don't know what was the accident, what actually happened? Just very briefly, what kind of accident was that, so that we
Yeah,
have an
sure.
idea?
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure. Um, so it wasn't a car accident. I don't drive, but yeah, I was just simply walking and I was about to cross this street that isn't very busy, but I could hear this from quite far away. I could hear this person on a scooter driving. Something in me when this person's driving too fast. It's a residential area. You shouldn't be driving like that. So there was a little warning that I didn't take heed, and so I crossed, and he came
Mhm.
whizzing around the corner, saw me like really late, braked really strongly, and kind of slipped. And in his fall, he kind of knocked my feet from underneath me, and I went, face into the pavement. So my
Right.
my teeth were
Mm.
smashed and like fractures here, and so yeah.
So somebody else's recklessness, somebody else's lack of, care and restraint. You
Mhm.
got the victim to that. You got as a passive victim to that. You didn't actively participate, but it was very interesting what you said about this intuition that you felt, even
Yeah.
though it wasn't recognized at the moment. Maybe it is okay that you didn't act on it, because it would have been a bit too much of suspicion probably if you have acted on it. But definitely your self-preservation instinct, this animal instinct to the Mars, which we all hold within ourselves, and this is basically energy that helps us survive in situations of danger, and that got activated. So that's very good news that it got activated, which means Mars is working
Mm.
and it got you alert. But at the same time, because probably you didn't have too much reason to suspect, because it wasn't something like somebody pointing a gun on you or at you or something like that, so that you can really start acting on your intuition. But seems like it was meant to happen. We'll see the transits and the progressions of the day in a minute, but yeah, it's interesting that it came from another person. Like Mars is in the seventh house, so I can't help being very curious in your history before the accident, and now you're very close to your Chiron return, and Chiron is in Aries in your chart. In the first house, you have an Aries ascendant, both ruled by Mars, and this very recent Chiron return is going to trigger the same issues again and raise the same questions of figuring out what Mars is doing in the chart, because it is part of that configuration, the T-square. And my question is basically, in the years before the accident, how do you see your own use of your Mars for positive purpose? For example, do you think there were situations when you stayed put, when you had to be a bit more self-assertive? Were there situations when you were tolerating something for the sake of peace, for the sake of harmony, or something like that? Or was it something else? For example, you thinking of yourself as potentially becoming too, aggressive appearing, so you were kind of restraining yourself and shutting yourself down so that this doesn't go to any sort of excess. So have you been Saturnizing your Mars, if I can say it that way, in one way or another? Or have you been blocking it in another way so that it didn't have the full freedom to do what it was supposed to do? Or was it just sleeping or something like that? And can we think that maybe some sort of unrealized potential of that Mars could be at the bottom of why at some point it just wants to come out very quickly and very violently?
Okay. Yes, that last thing that you said, unlived or unlived potential. I don't know how you said it exactly, but yeah. And I think maybe that's coming from, the Saturn square to the Sun. Yeah, I seem to do a lot of, starting things and then, retreating from whatever I started,
Okay.
and becoming more and more kind of inactive in the years leading up to the accident. So I can definitely see those forces. I can't exactly put into words exactly what I mean. There haven't been situations that come to mind where I actively shut down my Mars, or like, but there has been a feeling of getting stuck in
Yes.
the same place within myself, within the same kind of mind patterns, I guess. So yeah, feeling of getting stuck somehow.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's quite typical for what we see here as aspects as well. Maybe it's worth saying that having your Mars so close to the Sun in the chart, and the Mars is not always so close to the Sun. I mean, unlike Mercury and Venus that we expect to see very close to the Sun, either in the next sign or the same sign, very usual. But Mars could travel more widely through the chart. And your Mars is just a couple of degrees from the Sun. And here we have this inaction of the mythological and psychological metaphor of Mars being a very active agent to the Sun, like a knight to the king or something like this. So your solar energy, which is going to be really related to making the most of your personal potential, achieving some sort of success in your life the way you see it, that's very dependent on the Mars. So Mars has to do something about it. If Mars doesn't do something about it, then it's very likely that the Sun is not going to shine very brightly as well. So if there is a problem with one, there will be a problem with the other. At the same time, this Mars is probably going to be willing to listen very carefully to the orders of the Sun. So the Sun has to give it meaning. Otherwise, Mars just doesn't know what to do. So if the Sun in Libra out and construct it in your head like a strategy for what you would like to do, what you would like to achieve, and then Mars is not able to go out and do it because it's kind of lost in space. It doesn't know how to direct its energy. So they are mutually very dependent, these two in your chart. And then Saturn comes into the picture. Saturn could be some sort of restraint from outside. Chiron too. So we have Chiron on one side, which is opposite them, and then we've got Saturn square them. These two are the main players which are related to the functioning of the Mars-Sun duo in the chart. So we know that both Chiron and Saturn are outer, more outer than inner kind of planets. They are so mixed up with things that don't depend on you directly, but are conditioning kind of things, the environment, family issues, relationships, and stuff like this. So it might be that you have been so focused on other people's actions or lack of actions. So you are very much focused on the seventh house stuff, what others can do for you or cannot do for you, how the dynamic of different relationships is playing out. You constantly kind of bouncing back and reflecting a situation, kind of dealing with something when it needs to be dealt with, but not proactively initiating it. Maybe this was the case, and they were the restraining factors of the Chiron and the Saturn coming your way because of that. And probably one way to reverse the situation is exactly in those same areas of relationship and of maybe doing some sort of business with others, getting involved with others. In that area, for you to be a bit more the initiator, the starter, or the person that demands things to be done, if not their way only, but equally your way and the other person's way, kind of finding some sort of formula where you are not playing always a second fiddle, but you are also factoring, giving the tone of the situation. So does any of that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but I don't really see it play out in my life. Especially, yeah, the past five, okay, so the past 5 years I've been living in the same place, in Holland, and my boyfriend's in England. I'm moving there the beginning of October, and I've become a bit of a bit of a hermit over here. So I haven't really been dealing with a lot of people, like I've found that before, like I kind of lose myself so easily when I'm around other people. I just kind of become them
Yes.
energetically. So I've kind of, not shut myself off completely, but like, yeah, I don't know a lot of people here where I am. And so I've kind of been in this bit of a bubble. And one of the reasons I'm interested in this topic is because, like, I'm moving to England. I'm doing this big move from away from this little bubble, into, yeah. So that's I'm initiating something there, and again, it's, yeah, Mars is I don't know where Mars is going to be exactly at the beginning of October, but I know it's in Libra, and I know it's going to be, yeah, going over all these planets that I have there.
Yes, it is. So
Yeah.
you're going to have a Mars return, which is something that happens roughly about every 2 years for
Mm-hmm.
Mars. So that's when your return is going to be. And because Mars is part of those configurations, it's going to activate the whole thing, the whole dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting you said about the reclusiveness, because yeah, it seems like you're making a change now, which is in line with the conjunction of Mars with Uranus as well and Sun. This conjunction with Uranus requires a bit of a different strategy in relationships, or using relationships in order to escape from a situation which feels like you're in a rut, or you're in a stuck place. So what gives dynamics to the whole thing is also the Uranus. And Uranus Mars can be, I mean, it can turn out violent if the change is not timely. So now maybe because you are initiating such an enormous kind of move, there is not much conditions for something bad to happen, because you're using it up. You're using up the energy there. in the seventh house. I don't know what was the situation 3 years ago when the accident happened, whether it was more of a quiet period and not just then, but for quite some time before that. But something is really trying to get you out of your mode through Uranus unexpected happenings through other people when the situation gets too stuck. So maybe that's really what's going on, that in your particular chart, the moments of lethargic kind of going with the flow are not very good moments. They're potentially dangerous moments because you have a very dynamized Mars and it needs expression. It needs some sort of outlet. And when you are too passive, it gets literally bottled up. And until the point when the container is not good enough to contain it and it explodes from somewhere. So yeah, this is the direction. But let's take a look at 3 years ago quickly. Now let me just take a look. It also is interesting that you have very little earth in your chart, almost none, but at the same time you got quite a lot of fire, and the moon in fire, the ascendant in fire, the sun is technically also in a male sign. So this is a lot of male, proactive, out there energy, which I think is probably being restrained by Saturn mostly and other things, but something is not giving it the chance to explore as much as it can possibly explore. Now I have here the chart of 22nd of October 2020. Let me see if that's the one. Now this is now, so we'll come back to that. That's the 22nd of October. So here is what I wanted to show you about this. In the middle is your chart, the red one. The green one is the progressions at the time. And here I have deliberately included all the progressed planets. Normally I just include for the sake of clarity and for us to be able to see it more easily. I usually include just the 5 progressed planets: Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. But today I included all the progressed planets in the green one. You can see that they are coinciding where we're talking about the slower planets, so they don't make such a big difference. But I spotted one of them which makes a difference, and that's why I kept them here. And this is Uranus. I would like to start with that. So in the progressed chart, the middle one, there were 2 things which I think are very relevant to the accident. One is that Uranus was changing sign. So Uranus is one of those planets which we normally disregard in progressions. We don't even look at it, what it's doing by progression, because it normally doesn't do much. It's one of the slow planets, and over the course of our life, it moves very slowly, and progresses just a little bit. But you see, it's only moved 3 degrees. So from the natal Uranus in 27 Libra, in 2020, it was at 0 Scorpio here. But it's quite important when one of those big planets is changing sign by progression. That's a very big shift, a very big potential activator as well. So I think that's part of why the whole atmosphere was very charged at that particular point. And that was one of the trigger things, because if this was happening with a Uranus, which is not part of a configuration with Mars and with the Sun and with everything else that we just saw in the chart, maybe it wouldn't have been so important that it's moving from Libra to Scorpio. But in your case, I think it is quite important, because it's almost like we're having a very big spotlight on an area of the chart where Mars is vulnerable, and it's in the 7th house. So could this be one way to look at it? Could this be that you would have lived up to 2020 all your life with Uranus in the 7th house in Libra. So other people were Uranian in a Libra way, and out of a sudden, things switched to Scorpio. And the whole situation that you experienced is, to me, more reminiscent of Scorpionic kind of intense situation than Libra. So that's one thing here. Then you had at the time your progressed moon, the biggest activator by progression, had just crossed the ascendant. It was in Aries, very close to Chiron, so another arm of the T-square here. So the progressed moon is basically also activating the T-square. And she's opposite your natal Mars. Yeah? So you were emotionally and physically vulnerable to violence at that particular point. I mean, we cannot go back and say this is what caused it or predicted by looking at that, but we can see that this is a moment when, in the 28-year-long cycle of the progressed moon around the whole chart, that's one of the most stressful positions it can be in, and you had it there on this date. So the moon moves just 1 degree per month, and she was close enough to Chiron and the ascendant and the Mars configuration and everything else. So this is mainly the progressions acting on. What about the transits? The transits are at the outer wheel on the blue. So I'm sure you all see where the transiting Mars was at that point. Yes, Sam? I can see you nodding. Tell us.
It's like a little moon sandwich as well.
Yes, it is. Well, that's quite something, because
so it's, do I have this correctly, that it's that the transiting Mars is exactly opposite
your natal Mars.
natal Mars, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Wow.
without over exaggerating it, I think this is so clear, isn't it? We all experience quite often Mars opposite Mars. Like we experience that every 2 years. So not every time somebody has Mars opposite Mars, something extremely violent happens like this. But in your case, the condition of the original Mars is already very, very vulnerable, let's call it that way, because of the aspects, because of the planets that it's surrounded with. The fact that Mars in your chart is so close to the Sun automatically makes Mars opposite the Sun at the same time. Mars opposite Uranus. Mars conjunct Chiron. Mars square Saturn. So basically, this transiting Mars on that day was repeating your natal configuration, but as a mirror on the other side. It was teaming up with the Chiron, but experiencing a similar pressure from Saturn and opposing the planets in the 7th house. So this is quite a charged situation. I think when we get the layers one over the other, we can see that the moment was pretty volatile. Something was meant to happen at that moment to trigger, to shock you, to get you out of your comfort zone, to, I mean, physically also attack you, because very often when we talk about a Martian trigger, we expect that things are not going to remain just underneath, just inside us, because we might suffer some sort of shock which remains totally psychological and doesn't play out as a physical violence. But Mars is really the planet from which we can expect that things are going to materialize physically in that way. So it was on the progressed moon as well, yeah, which is also very important. And what else? I mean, haven't gone very deep into oh yes, there is something else extremely important going on here, which I forgot almost, because all your windows are at the top of my screen and they were covering the planets in Capricorn. So maybe you remember that in this crazy 2020, we had this accumulation of planets in Capricorn, including Pluto, including Jupiter and Saturn. And on this particular day, the 22nd of October, the moon was there too in Capricorn. You see? So this was only on that day. Maybe also on the previous day, but on this particular day, I think maybe if we are to blame one thing on that day, which really pulls the trigger of not only having the conditions of something a bit more extreme to occur, but also for that to happen, to materialize, was the position of that moon. Because moon in 19 Capricorn is exactly opposite Saturn and exactly square the two Marses. And she is very much extremely kind of exaggerated herself, her action, her meaning of the moon, of the daily moon, from being conjunct Pluto and Jupiter. And we can also say Saturn, even though it's a bit more distant. So being part of that Capricornian group. So you see how on that day you were almost like attacked from every single place, from everywhere at the same time. Something came to a moment when obviously that whole thing was scheduled, because what we're looking at here is the timing of things that were always scheduled to come to this position at that time. So the planets were meant to be ordered in that way on this day for you. And this is a very like activating combination for your particular chart, because you just happen to have something going on here, something going on down there, and around the whole axis of the cross of the cardinal signs. And maybe also because it's cardinal energy, it was like unstoppable. When so many cardinal things pile up together and they create tension between themselves, it's usually a situation which is unstoppable. Does any of you want to make a comment on all of this, or ask something about this chart? Yeah, Stephen.
Okay, let me unmute myself. Well, Radina, when you posted Miranda's natal chart, you listed up at the corner some of the asteroids, and you have Pallas at basically 23 Capricorn. So actually,
Let's
so
take
actually,
a
gonna go back to that one.
yeah, here.
Okay, so the T square of Mars to Chiron to Saturn, including Pallas in the display, makes it a grand cross.
Yeah, that's correct.
What adds to the significance of it is that the Pallas is being symbolically related to a female energy, which is a part of the strategic warring factor of, let's say, a General Mars expression. So it adds a strategic option in terms of navigating the dynamics. Here's a thought I would like to add. For the geometry, you say, okay, one sign is opposite another. You look at the wheel, say, oh, it's opposite here. That's just general geometry. But in terms of astrology, the dynamics are something different. The dynamics are active. You're not going to say that, oh, Libra is opposite Aries. It says, well, actually, when we say look at the T square, you say, oh, it's in opposition to. Well, the idea of an opposition to implies intrinsically a sense of conflict. For myself, I like, as far as using English, to say in polarity with. So when something is in polarity with, there's an internal dynamic that has a movement rather than an opposition of one against another. So a person would intrinsically feel a sense of constant inner conflict. So the compliment I would like to make about that is that the Grand Cross, which you were referring to, are all cardinal signs. So that strikes me as a significating theme within the underlying dynamic of the chart itself. Because in terms of you go on the solar fire and that conjunction of Sun, Mars to Chiron, Saturn, and Pallas is the only Grand Cross. So that strikes me as like, well, all right, this one kind of stands out as a dynamic theme, but rather for Miranda to feel like, oh my gosh, I have these frustrations with my Mars to Saturn, and I have these self-doubts related to Mars in opposition to my Chiron, and I don't have a balancing point. But then adding Pallas in there as Capricorn, it allows a sense of a functioning organic process of a dynamic, and I guess because you had it up there for the Pallas, but it doesn't display, so it's easily overlooked, and that was just something I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and you spotted it very well that this Capricorn 23, if we look at the chart, it will be somewhere around here, yeah, in this top of the chart, and it will be completing the cross, as you said. So basically, if we go back to this chart with the transits and progressions of 22nd of October 2020, all those planets in Capricorn here are pretty much where the Pallas is, and exactly where Pluto was at that time. So Pluto at the time, you see, was Saturn too, but Pluto the closest. And yeah, at the moment, maybe this coming back just in an attempt to answer your question, Miranda, about the upcoming return of Mars to Libra, which is starting tomorrow, by the way. But what could be expected from that? I don't think that you should fear it, not at least in the same way as fear was totally like logical and normal for that moment in 2020, because at the moment, let's just see if I can find, so that's 22nd. No, that's Patricia. Sorry about it, guys. I'm just trying to find another chart. Here, this one. So this is yesterday, basically. So today, yesterday, the current moment, and the effect of the current moment on your chart. So at the moment, I guess, based on what you said about the move, you probably are completing an action which was kind of prepared in this period. And by doing that, by moving away, going to the UK, you probably will be kind of completing a cycle or completing the task, because right now you've got Uranus on the moon, on the progressed moon. So your progressed moon has moved to Taurus. It's at 22 Taurus. The current Uranus is activating that here. Also, Mars, so here is the current Mars. It's going to move into Libra, but then we're not having the pressure in Capricorn so much anymore. We have the very last stages of Pluto in Capricorn. So we can see that maybe Pluto was one of the very big players and causes at the time when you experienced the accident in 2020. It was mixed up with all those planets in Capricorn and activating the whole cross in your chart. Since then, Pluto moved to Aquarius and then came back to Capricorn, and now it's traveling in its last moments of Capricorn. It will soon return to Aquarius and will never go back to Capricorn. So I feel like you probably will be left alone, and you will be given a space to breathe, and there won't be so much of a charged situation as it was before. This is just a guess from me. Also, just by looking into this chart, we can see that it's by no means as active and as dynamic as the other one was. And yeah, of course, you're going to have another return of Mars, and Mars is going to be here. Also worth noting, during a period of time when the nodes are traveling to Aries and Libra, and when the South Node is in Libra. So from many different sides, this period of time now for you is a period of reconciliation, of trying to find the meaning behind what happens, more getting inwards, thinking about and assessing different things. This is because of the South Node, which is raising the questions of what didn't work out in the past and what needs to be changed in the future. And maybe most importantly for you is to switch your attention towards your Chiron in Aries. That's extremely important because this is the bridge between you know, a certain mode of operation, kind of lifestyle that is natural for before the Chiron return, and being able to make the healthy transition towards how you're going to lead your life and organize your life after the Chiron return. So you are not yet 60, you know, you are far away from the second Saturn return, but from the beginning of the 50s is when the preparation begins. And that preparation is extremely important, mostly for health issues. Because Chiron, I'm saying all that because Chiron is obviously related to your Mars, the Mars configuration, the Saturn configuration. And now the return of Chiron is going to show you what you need to do with the Mars, how everything needs to be fed, how you need to support yourself, especially physically, and maybe change the tempo. I don't know whether changing the tempo for you means accelerating it or slowing it down. I kind of have a feeling that you need to accelerate it, even though this is counter to what we expect from the Chiron return. So in a way, giving more energy, more dynamic action for the Aries Mars things in the chart. So getting out more maybe more physically active is one thing that comes to mind, which is very, very logical for this configuration. Paying very close attention to your health, to the gut health. You know, the gut health is related to the signs Cancer and Aries, and to the Moon and Mars. Moon and Mars, they really can give us those signs of something in the system not really working properly, and us having to step in and do something about it. So do you think this might be relevant for you?
Absolutely. It's but you know, that's health is a topic, you know, if we start talking about that, you know, yeah, it's difficult for me, and I feel like I have to figure this out. I can't yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I have to figure it out, as in I don't have a lot of physical energy because I have a lot of chronic stress, so I have to somehow work out how I can relax so I have more energy.
Yes,
to be active, if that
I
makes
see.
if that makes any sense.
Yes, yes. And being too tired, is it a result of being too busy with other people's stuff or something external?
Yeah, probably as well, but it's also yeah, I guess I experienced this these kind of opposing forces within myself a lot, second guessing myself, a lot of doubt, a lot of like back and forth in my head, in my movements. So I think that probably makes you tired. So
Oh yeah, of course, and especially mentally, which can then become physically, because let's not forget that the Mars is in Libra. We know the proverbial undecisiveness of Libra, and I have a similar problem, always needing bounce off ideas or opinions with others in order to make a decision. Very often not being able to make a decision, which also leads to that situation of being stuck. So something is trying to these fiery energies in your chart, the ascendant, the Chiron, the moon in Leo, many things are also the south node is in a mental sign, while the north node is in a fire sign. So this is another way we can see that you're more prone to remaining in your head, getting stuck in your head, in your thinking, in your constant assessment, or getting more and more information about things instead of acting. So the more acting, even if this hasn't been totally thought through, the better. So Chiron will spotlight in Aries. So obviously having Chiron in Aries by birth is we expect a problem there. We expect a wound. We expect that it's not going to be the easiest thing for you to mobilize the Aries energy. But everything related to fire in your chart is potentially good for you. Yeah, it holds things which are good for you. So you need to own your fire to prevent fire from coming like as an attack from outside.
Burning me up. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And also to prevent illness, which is a result of too much energy being stuck inside and not, you know how we start killing ourselves, we start kind of destroying our own organism with that energy if it's inside us and we're not able to get it out there and in that way also perform a form of cleaning of the system. So Chiron is really going to ask you to reconsider all those things because the Chiron return is this sensitive, judgment day kind of thing of now you decide how you're going to grow older. Like you're not old yet, by no means, but this is now the beginning of the journey of preparing for the more mature age. And some people give it up at the Chiron return internally. They even without realizing it, they make that decision that from now on it's going to be a slow deterioration. However more years you've got left, it's a slow deterioration. But others make a different decision. They kind of take their life in their own hands, which is really Martian action. Having the will, summoning up the will, the energy, the courage to say, now I'm going to make an impact on whatever is going to happen. At least try it. Yeah, at least make a move and see what happens. So I think now more than ever, that opposition between Chiron and Mars, maybe as Stephen mentioned, when we have the oppositions and this polarizing effect between two things, psychologically in your head, you might be thinking you're more likely to side with one or the other. This is so typical. Like when we have oppositions, we tend to choose one to the expense of the other and concentrate on that side. But sooner or later, the other one also wants to participate. Yeah, so that's roughly what I'm thinking. Okay, well, looking at the clock, I think it's probably time to move on to the second example. Any questions on the chart? Any other comments, or if you want to add something, Miranda, at the end of this discussion?
I just want to say thank you that, I'm really happy that I have a recording because, it's a lot of information. Yes. I might come back to you with some questions afterwards after I've listened to it again. So, but basically, thank you so much. But basically the move, I don't know the date for sure yet, but it's going to be between the 1st and the 5th of October. And yeah, the move is good.
No, I think so. Well, I cannot say that categorically. I have no idea, your partner, what's the situation with the partner. Right. But the mere fact that it's a big change, it's a shift. It's got an element of Mars in it, plus Uranus. We can see in your chart that you've got the North Node in Sagittarius, and when in doubt about something which is crucial, like a life-changing thing, I always refer back to the nodes. is that serving my node or the person's node in this case? And it seems like it is serving your node because it requires you to step away from your immediate comfort zone, which is more like the Gemini area or the second house area, and to open up. Also, there is another thing which we didn't have time to go through, but there is something in your chart in general as a whole, which is, that's just a tip for you to explore in your own time. It's about revealing something from the past, kind of uncovering as much as possible things in the past which have been hidden, stuck, or disregarded, or something like that, and courageously bringing them out to the light to be processed, to be understood, and not running away from that. And any sort of secrets, any sort of uncomfortable things from the past, you should courageously, maybe again using the Mars with Uranus, with the Sun, with everything else. That's why it's probably so concentrated. Not be afraid to dig and to uncover. So yeah, that's related to my exploration about the chart, the Sabian symbols, and other things as well in your case. But I won't go deeper into why. We can talk about it another time. All right. Well, thank you too for sharing. And now I suggest we move on to Patricia's chart. But did I miss Patricia? Are you still here? Or I think you disappeared for a moment.
Yeah, I'm still here. I think it came off and then I came back in again.
Here, great. Sorry, I don't see all the windows on my screen. But yes, great. Okay, now time to move to yours. I will share another one. Can you guys see it? Okay. Totally different shape of the chart here. And is it not beautiful how in this rather symmetrical aspect configuration we can see in the middle, everything seems very like symmetrical. Yeah, that's the word, symmetrical. And the triangle really stands out. It's very easy to see. It's not like in Miranda's chart, there was so much going on, so many different aspects. It was very busy. Here, if you look at the aspects and the chart, I think it's very much standing out that the pressure is only in one place, and that place is Mars. So what I mean by that, here in the table, we can see in red the 3 squares that your Mars is making to Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. And yeah, there is an opposition between the Sun and Saturn. It's a bit of a wide orb, but apart from that, and between Saturn and Neptune, but is it not like immediately we can see that the pressure, the squares, the only squares in the chart are squares to Mars. So Mars here is at the top of the triangle in Pisces. So a position of Mars, another position of Mars by sign, where we expect to be a little bit toned down, a bit more passive, a bit more restrained, a bit more afraid to be very outgoing and very like direct. Mars in Pisces is usually more peaceful. Probably in this case, too peaceful. I don't know. But there is again a square to Saturn, like it was with Miranda. And again, a square to a bunch of other planets in another place. So this is here we've got, even though you're a Scorpio, you've got so much going on in Sagittarius, including the moon in Sagittarius. And this is the area which also, all of them, we can say all those planets in Sagittarius, they're also feeding the frustration, the fear, the trouble, the, I don't know, the confusion of Mars. So Mars is the one that maybe holds the most pressure in the whole chart. Something requires you to use the Mars. The Mars has to be put into action. That might be very difficult, very, very difficult, because, as I said, Mars in Pisces is very peaceful. So my reading of that thing, which is just a guess, and I have been looking in other things like the Sabian symbols for each degree of the planets. I don't know if you know about these symbols, but they gave me a little bit of some idea what might be going on here. It's a bit of a contradiction. Mars in Pisces, the 12th sign, Pisces, in the 6th house of the chart. And then the squares here are all about the mutable signs. So we've got Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces. Now, Stephen, let's take a look if there is something in Virgo. So the ascendant is in Virgo. Count that. I mean, but the ascendant is not opposite Mars. It's, you know, in a different place. So here, when we look at the asteroids, I don't see anything in Virgo here. So to complete, you know, to create a cross like it was in Miranda's case. So we are sitting on just the T-square, but we can say that, yeah, this area here in Virgo is anything traveling through that area is completing by transit the tension and is activating the Mars. We'll take a look at the moment. There are a few things doing that for you. So let's go back to Mars in Pisces in the 6th. My suspicion is that maybe you live in a world, in a environment probably related to your family and the people you need to work with, deal with, the culture. I don't know exactly where. I mean, how you're interacting with society, you know, which is 9th house topics, and the environment of the neighboring atmosphere, like neighbors, close friends, relatives, you know, brothers and sisters, all sort of kind of the immediate environment. But a lot of pressure is coming from these areas for you through chaos. I think some sort of chaos is created in your environment, which is very disturbing for you. Things is simply not working well and something needs to be put back in order. A very physical, a very practical problem, or several problems, or many problems have to be solved. Someone needs to step in and say, we have to, together, you know, in a group, in a community, in a cooperative kind of way, we have to do something about this because it's not good. There is something, the topics of too much restriction, rubbish kind of thing, or something has been broken, or something is you know, not healthy, or is hurting somebody, or things like that. Basically, your Mars is the one. Through your Mars, you need to take the initiative and say it. Say to the other people, wake up. We need to do something about this problem. So now I give the word to you. Is there something going on like this? Is there any problem you're trying to solve?
Well, the only thing I can think of, and that is very current, is that I live with my adult children and I do far too much. So I do, and it almost makes me feel a little bit ill that I'm sort of overworked, and I've never been very assertive at I've only recently been starting to put my foot down, but I tend to be very passive and gentle and accommodating and do far too much, and it's sort of making me feel a little bit ill sometimes. So
I see.
that's the only thing I can think of.
So in the 6th house, is the Mars too much of a servant?
Oh God, I mean even at work as well.
At work as well.
Yeah, so I feel very natural when I'm serving someone, being of service.
Yeah.
And I work far too hard for other people at work. I'm a support worker. And it's just a bit overwhelming. It is quite overwhelming.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, Mars needs to do certain corrections, just a little bit. Maybe recently you were given a lot of reason to think about that in the last few years, because similar to Miranda, who is just about to have the Chiron return. You already had it recently. So the Chiron return is, so again in Aries, you're very similar age to one another. That's why you both have Chiron in Aries, but yours is in the 7th house. So we can expect that some burden can come to you from other people in your life. So it might be, part of the story might be this. You have this very good, really lovely trine, ground trine in fire. So the South Node in fire with all the planets in Sagittarius and with Chiron. So they create this nice triangle. But sometimes nice things like this can make us not vigilant enough about problems, and we might think that things are working fine while they actually need to be corrected. So there might be an element of underestimating how bad for you certain good things are. So you might be doing some very good things in general, but because you're doing too much of them and without meaning, without clear direction, that's why it's like Mars has forgotten to stop. Now, what caught my attention in your chart is that while everything else seems to be very connected to one another, like the planets are talking to each other for many different, and most of the time the dialogue is very friendly because you have, you know, the sextiles here and here from Pluto, the big trine, and so on. Yes, there is also the tension to Mars, but in general, there are lots of channels of communication between the different functions in you, apart from the Sun. So the Sun in Scorpio is a bit isolated. It's actually quite isolated. So the Sun is what gives us the sense of meaning, the sense of long-term direction. Why am I doing the things I'm doing? And where do I want to get? What is my thing? What I want to be loyal to? The Sun in Scorpio is very transformative. It's a potential to be one kind of person in certain periods of your life and then totally change and become somebody very different because you have decided to make a change. It's very capable of complete transformation. But your Sun, because it's in Scorpio and it's not like, I mean, it makes a lot of aspects, but out of sign. So for example, it's opposite Saturn, but it's not in Sagittarius, the Sun, it's in Scorpio, and Saturn is in Gemini. So even though it's in opposition, it's not in the signs. Yeah, it makes a conjunction to Neptune, which is very close. It's not to be disregarded, and maybe that makes the Sun a bit dreamy, a bit disconnected, a bit like the Mars. Yeah, the Mars in Pisces, a bit like too willing to go with the flow and live in your imaginary world, not in the physical world. But Mars in the 6th house wants to bring you back to Earth and wants to start solving some practical questions, practical issues. Maybe the Sun is not giving orders to Mars very clearly. It's not telling Mars, go there and do that, fight this battle or the other battle, because your Sun is too relaxed. And Mars is also tending to be too relaxed. And then you are creating, over time, situations where really what I call bottled up energy has the conditions to be there, because without even noticing, there might be issues. And it's a bit worrying that Mars is in the 6th house, because again, we are expecting that if something goes wrong with that Mars, it's going to be health related. Yeah, in this area of life. So you should really be conscious about overwork, overstress, you know, finding ways to bring yourself back to Earth, to become a bit more connected to Earth. There are ways to do this. You know, when you're doing everyday tasks, everyday chores, you can try to consciously be a bit more mindful about it, almost like creating a ritual out of things that you generally do. I myself have 5 planets in Scorpio in the 6th house. And I think I know what it means to sometimes, and they are sextile Neptune, to sometimes disconnect when you're doing everyday things. You get so carried away that you're almost like doing them automatically. The washing up, the cooking, the cleaning, and all those sort of things, even your work tasks and stuff, you are doing them so automatically that you're not even enjoying them. But you could be enjoying them. You could be living a more rich and more down-to-earth life by just noticing what you're doing. Noticing yourself while you're preparing the coffee, noticing yourself while you're doing certain things, and kind of almost like you're dancing. Imagine you're dancing when you're doing things. And one thing I would suggest is having something that's working very, very well for me, is having background music at the background playing when you're doing certain things. Maybe if you're with other people, you can just have your headphones on and not disturbing anybody else. But with the right kind of music, you can tune yourself, your body, to the tasks that you're performing physically, and everything kind of turns into a dance and not being a tiresome, squeezing energy out of you, overburdening experience. And also that creates a rhythm, which you can feel when you can slow down and when you should kind of go quicker. I don't know, just an idea. I don't know if you like it, but I expect that Mars in Pisces probably would benefit from music and from the ability to kind of disconnect in that way, which is also very healthy. There are lots of therapies through music that you can explore. I'm not very aware of them, and I cannot recommend anything in particular, but I know that, you know how when you play music to your plants or to your animals, do you have any domestic animals? Cats or dogs or anything like that?
I have a cat. Yeah.
You have a cat?
Mhm.
And it's the cat a very crucial stress relief helper for you?
Well, she's just lovely to be around. Yeah, she is. Yeah. She
Yeah,
definitely
because the 6th house is also about pets and the relationship with pets. Yeah, so when
mean,
Mars is
I know that I need to be ground. I'm always telling myself I need to sort of ground, because I'm
Mhm.
very aware of that Neptune conjunct my sun and my mom. I mean, I've lived in a daydream for most of my life, but I quite
Exactly.
like it. I quite like it there. That makes sense. I quite like that,
Yes, no, I
but
expect
it's
that.
not really. I
Yeah.
know it's not healthy.
Well, you see, maybe looking at the nodes in the chart. I don't know how much you know about this, the past and the present, but it seems like maybe you come from a past, from a history, let's say karmic past, of certain comfort, like the Leo South Node in the 11th house might be a situation where you didn't really need to be very grounded, or you didn't really need to be thinking very hard about things and to be like strategic about things, but it was more like a free expression, an outflow of just being yourself. Maybe you were a child, maybe you remained a child or something like that. There is a certain spontaneity. So in this lifetime, nothing is really putting you under pressure to become very organized and very like serious in terms of earth. I'm sure you are serious enough and responsible enough person, but it's more about not that, but more about Mars saying to itself, let's get out of the clouds and start doing certain things with a purpose and for a purpose and for some sort of ambition that's in your head. Why bother? Maybe the Mars says, why bother? It doesn't matter at the end of the day. We all go back to the same place. Everything is just pointless. But it's not. Yeah, it's not. There is something here to be understood. So there is a certain mental exploration that has to happen. And the last thing you want to do is to create a health problem for yourself, which will make you have to stop and think and consider, instead of just flowing, to be reasonable about things and analyzing them. The North Node in Aquarius wants you to know, as hard as it is and as unnatural for you as it is, to explore things mentally, to make certain connections in your head, to be philosophical, to be like what we're doing right now, basically. Piece of information, the chart, so many things in the chart, it's very confusing, it's very but why not try to make sense of it and see what sort of thing we can learn from it, and how we can then plan for the future. Yeah. So yeah, you just need to do a bit more of planning for the future, I think, to make sure that Mars is okay and healthy and so on. But when it is okay and healthy, this Mars in the 6th house could be very creative, very, very good in helping others. The point is to be helping in the right place at the right time, and not to be just carried away with helping just for the sake of helping. Mars in Pisces has one big problem in general. It is very unselective. It doesn't say no to something and yes to another thing. It says yes to everything and to everybody. And as long as there is something to be solved, a problem to be solved, you are willing to jump and provide help. But sometimes you need to know where to stop and which things really deserve your attention and participation. And so again, it comes down to using the Mars for something which is a mission, a purpose that makes sense to you, and you have consciously chosen to go there and to do that, because you have a lot of capacity to give. The point is to whom and when. Yeah, that's it, I think. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your overall situation and background, so that we see whether what we see in the chart makes sense?
I don't know. I had a difficult start in life, which affected self-confidence, which might be relevant. I've got 3 children. I became a single parent, so I was doing a lot. I took on a lot, and I'm a support worker. I like that helping sort of role.
Mm-hmm. Well, is it not interesting, the Saturn square Mars? I don't know if Miranda is still with us, but because this is repeating, Saturn square Mars very often affects our sense of how able we feel we are. It's not really the kind of self-esteem that Venus governs, which is more internal feeling, whether we feel good about ourselves. This is more Venus, but Mars square Saturn might be, even though you might feel relatively okay with yourself inside, when it comes to going out and doing something, asserting yourself or winning something, or getting into a kind of argument with somebody when it's needed, or you don't believe very well in your ability to play out the situation in a positive way. You either feel like you're going to blunder it, to make a mistake, you're too afraid of making a mistake, or maybe you underestimate your Martian ability and you feel like you need someone to help. Who knows? Or maybe you attract people who are in a Martian way not capable of supporting you or helping you properly. Like this might play out with other people, like you don't get the right kind of adequate Martian energy from the people that you get involved with. They are weak in one way or another. Some people say that in a woman's chart, Mars can tell us a lot about the men we get involved with. I don't know if this is the case. Like in my case, for example, I have Mars in Libra, like Miranda, and my partner is very Libran. He's got a Venus in Libra and the whole stellium in Libra and lots of things going on in Libra. So the Libra element is quite present, and I have observed myself that I kind of have a tendency to pick on things and people that have Libra going on in them in one way or another. So it kind of creates an attraction. So Mars in every person, in men and women, it creates a point of attraction. So I wonder, your Mars in Pisces, whether this could have attracted also Piscean men or Piscean people, which usually means someone that also has a tendency to disconnect from Earth, to be living in a world in their own heads, or to be prone to all sorts of dependencies, like kind of if you are so willing to do a lot of things, maybe you are the perfect person to be taken advantage of by others. And Saturn square Mars could be a fear of being taken advantage of. Also, there is another way of this can play out. But this pressure that's created between Saturn and Mars can also create someone very capable, actually. Over time, because you feel like you have to excel, you learn better how to support yourself, or how to be more self-sufficient, or how to achieve goals that require long-term patience. Any contact between Mars and Saturn could be very, very helpful for enduring hardship and being able to wait, being able to stay with something until it gets resolved, instead of, immediately getting away and not being able to have the patience and the resilience. So this could make you very, very resilient as well, the Saturn. But Saturn is opposite the Sun. So I expect in your case that Saturn is more outside forces, which are creating challenges for you so that they can test your Sun and they can test your Mars. Just for the sake of, maybe for the good of the Sun and Mars, I don't know, but definitely would expect a childhood when it comes to the male role models to be quite difficult. Like that there is a tendency for the role model male figure, whoever that happened to be, to not have played a very easy example for you, but maybe missing, or maybe not positive, and something like that. Is that the case? Is that something like that going on?
Yeah, in some ways, sort of a bit distant. So a bit distant.
A bit
But I
distant.
am very resilient. Like, I mean, I've been through quite a lot, even like with my children, like with their ill health and having to shoulder everything. But I don't know if it's the Scorpio part, but I can take on the responsibility. I know that I can do it. I'm strong enough to do it, and I'll do it.
Yes.
So
You have also earthly ascendant. The ascendant in Virgo is connected to Mars, I think, because Mars is in the 6th house. And the ascendant in Virgo puts that particular mask on your face, the Virgo mask. You may not feel like a Virgo yourself very much. We already said about the disconnecting from Earth and so on. But that ascendant might help, because that's the element that can present you in front of the world as someone who is grounded. It's a bit of a lie, in a good sense, yeah, because almost like you advertise yourself as being a grounded earthly person, while actually underneath the surface you've got Sun conjunct Neptune and Mars in Pisces and so on and so forth. But still, I can see the calmness in you. I can see the groundedness in you, and that also helps. This whole Saturnian resilience, because Saturn is the ultimate Earth, and I personally connect Chiron with the 6th house. I've said that before here in the group, but I don't know if you have ever thought of it this way. That Chiron, the planet, I think its natural place is the 6th house, even though Mercury still rules the 6th house. But I personally suspect that Chiron has a lot more to do with Virgo and the 6th house than we ever previously have used as astrologers. And you are still under the period of time of Chiron return. Actually, let's take a look at your current situation, and we would end on that. We have a few more minutes. So this is you with the current transits and progressions. And I think it's always important to look at these things when we look at the chart, because we see what is currently activated, what currently requires your attention, and what are the issues of the day really at that stage of your life. Because maybe we can see now that I guess it made sense to be talking about Mars and your particular Mars with somebody these days, because Saturn traveling through Pisces at the moment, the transiting Saturn, is on your Mars right now. And even though Saturn is currently going backwards, it's retrograde, in the last year, it's been over your Mars a few times. Now it's going back, but then soon it's going to reverse the direction again, go direct again, and pass one more time over the Mars. So it's like Saturn has been traveling around your Mars recently, and really reminding you of what needs to be really seriously taken into account, because every time we have this sort of transit by Saturn, it's hard, it feels restricting, it feels like things are not going really the way we want in the material world. And sometimes there is hardship, financial hardship, health-related hardship, and stuff like that. But that's a wake-up call to start doing something about it, and work on this. At the same time that Saturn is over the Mars, it is squaring itself exactly, because you have Saturn in 3 degrees Gemini, and currently it's at 3 degrees Pisces. So that's an exact square. So in the Saturn cycle that we all go through our lifetime, that has these stepping stones every 7 years, you are now at one of those stepping stones, because Saturn is squaring its natal position. And that's the kind of square which is not, it's not so much about something happening. It's more about your thoughts, your consciousness, what you decide, what you notice, and you decide to do something because something has been happening for years and years, and now you have a chance to change it because you're thinking about it. Yeah, that's the so-called second square of Saturn to Saturn. So that's quite important. We can see how the whole topic of Saturn square Mars is recurring for you in your life at the moment. Also, now this month and next month, Mars, the topic of today, this short-term activator Mars, is going to be traveling to your first house. It's already crossed the ascendant, and that's going to give you a bit more dynamic energy, a bit more maybe enthusiasm, kind of waking up energy. So use it, because that's a very good opportunity. And your current emotional state, which is reflected in the progressed moon, your progressed moon being in Libra right now, Mars is going to pass over that. And again, maybe give you some impetus for change, for movement, for a little bit more action than before. And what else? I mean, there was some more that I had spotted, but you guys tell me if you see something else that you think might be relevant right now. Or actually, I see this nodal thing going on. We mentioned a little bit about your nodes. By the way, having a south node in the sign Leo, like you do, could also have something to do with being involved with children in your so-called previous life, and this being a recurrent topic in the current life. So we always expect stuckness and problems, some sort of problem outside of the usual. Something has become too much in terms of the south node, and has to be balanced. So could it be maybe that in the past and currently you have been having too much attention on being surrounded by, the care for children or things like that, to the expense of your own kind of self-expression and free time and ability to take care of yourself, your own needs. The current Venus retrograde that we are still under is in Leo. And because Venus is traveling backwards, she's now at 13 Leo, but she's probably going to get closer and closer and closer to your nodes, to the South Node, this month. So in the next week, 2 weeks, while Venus is doing that, your nodal axis is activated. So this balancing issue between what what is totally outgrown and needs to go, needs to be reformed, or slightly, allow for the North Node thing to enter your life as a bit of experience, now is also spotlighted. So that's another way of seeing that it's a good moment because of the transits to pay attention to what you need to balance in terms of Leo Aquarius, where Leo is too much and where Aquarius needs to balance things out voluntarily a bit more. And any questions, comments from others, anything else you guys want to add or you see here?
I was
Yeah?
going to say, back on the other chart, I noticed that her moon was actually void of course. So whilst it's come down as Sagittarius, obviously very more restrictive in that, at that time she was almost like energyless. There was no influence, which could lead to sort of like the dreamy states. Obviously the emotions are a bit more wishy-washy. They feel like they want to have the solidarity of being sad. They feel like they should be anchored, but at that point they were still just they weren't directed. And to me, the fact that she said that she's got the issues of saying, I think it was your words, I apologize if they weren't your words, something about being pushover or at least being felt that way. It could be that it's that almost anchorless feeling at that point with the void of course. And it flared up with what you said about obviously Mars has just gone over her AC and is coming up to her progress moon. You've been putting your foot down a bit more. Obviously the first house and that area is very much sort of your outward perception. It's what people see. So it could be that sort of like it's finally got to that point that whilst you might not feel it, you feel the need to put on the face of, no, I'm putting my foot down, and it's going to come and collect with the emotions, and it might tie in a bit more and you'll actually feel the authority rather than just putting on the face.
Well, that's interesting because I have been putting my foot down and I've enjoyed it and I've felt it. And it's really not like me. It's so not like my nature.
Yes, taking control as well. Yeah, because of the Saturn, maybe also now is the moment to take control and don't fear. I mean, at least we can see from what's going on in the chart currently that it is a good moment to do that. Maybe in another time it's not such a good idea. Now it seems like it's a moment, at least in the next month, to use Mars very actively without fear. And Sam, thank you so much. I mean, for a moment I thought you were talking about me because I mean, you were effectively talking about me by talking about Patricia, because going back to this void of course moon, this is something not everybody is talking about or using very much. So here, what I'm really pleased that this software can give me automatically when somebody has been born on a void moon. And this is very rare. So Patricia, you see here it says moon void of course here for your chart. So that means that when you were born on that day, on this day at that time, the moon was not making any aspects to any of the other planets, just for a short time. So that is usually like being disconnected emotionally disconnected from everything else that's going on and being left alone, which can give very good objectivity to the person. So you potentially can assess situations or have like a your opinion about things could be very clear because of that. But also it can lead to what some said, this disconnectedness. And only 2% of the whole population, statistically, of the planet, only 2% are born on a void moon. And you're one of them, I'm one of them as well. And we have another thing in common, which I think is so relevant, we should have mentioned, which is Mars square Neptune. So not only is your Mars in Pisces, the sign of Neptune, but it is also square Neptune. Yeah, we can see that here as well. So Mars is square Jupiter, the old ruler of Pisces. It's square Neptune, the new ruler of Pisces. And we already spoke about the Saturn. So the Neptune element really also gives a lot into the picture of lack of motivation, because people like you and me have this tendency of feeling an internal conflict between asserting yourself, your own ego, your own interest, and the interest of the bigger group. We all, I mean, we're very concerned about not appearing pushy or not appearing aggressive in some way, and there is no motivation to just fight for your own thing because of the Neptune element. With you, the Neptune element is very, very strong. It's very, like, the tuning of that is very, very high. And I read today in a book, the book is The Inner Planets by Liz Green and Howard Sportis, if you guys are interested. And in the section about Mars, these are a couple of seminars about Mars, Howard Sportis was saying about the contact between Neptune and Mars, that one way to resolve the square is to be doing something, so the action, the Mars, to be channeled towards something which is for the common good, for the other people's good, not only for your own personal good. So if you're starting a project, if the project is only good result, or the result that you have in your head is to do with you, with your success or with your gain or with something that you get out of that, you are not going to be motivated enough to go with it. Like, for example, if I want to promote myself as an astrologer so that my services grow and my popularity grows and stuff like that, I do that, but I kind of don't have the energy. I don't have the motivation to do it from that point of view. I would do it 2 days, and then on the third day I'll forget about it. So there isn't that thing inside that's constantly pushing. But if you think about helping others and how your project or your participation can be, can make a difference for something or for someone, then with that objective, the Mars with Neptune gets a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and really gets involved and sticks with it. And then if we get the Saturn there, the Jupiter there, this could be a very productive mix of successful action. But the motivation has to happen has to come from things which are beyond the ego. Yeah, maybe this is really what your nodes are all about, Patricia. Maybe in your previous life or lives, it was all about the ego, all about the private person, the individual person. Leo, well, now it needs to be about the group, it needs to be about everybody, about something that we all care about because we care about that thing, and we get outside of our own skins in order to work for that thing. And there is a lot of Sabian symbols in your chart which are alluding to community work, working groups with others, or joining hands with others. You stepping in a bit like a leader, almost like saying, this is the problem we need to solve, but let's solve it together. Yeah, you're kind of announcing what needs to be solved. You're telling them, you're kind of pointing the attention to the problem, but you're not the only one that's working for the solution. You need to work with them for the solution, something like that. Yeah. Oh, this is it. Any comments and questions at the end?
Oh, thank you, Dave. I mean, you just described me very well. And
I hope so.
and I've been always worried about my Mars. I think it's because I'm just very aware. I've almost been obsessed about my Mars because I know it can cause me so many problems because I'm always tired and I'm always just automatically doing too much, like for other people, and I know it's a bit of a problem for me. So like it'd be good for me to like focus on it and try and express
Yes,
it in a better way.
it's going to be hard now that Saturn is on it, but you need to use the opportunity to introduce some sort of discipline for something. Maybe the discipline has to be that stopping to do things when it's needed to be stopped. Yeah, something like that. Stephen wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. Well, Patricia, I'd like to extend a compliment to you about having your Mars and Pisces in the 6th house. And part of it is from a masculine point of view to a woman. So for you as a woman having Mars and Pisces in your 6th house, you have a very accentuated sense of devotional loyalty. Huh? Yes. Now, the problem with that is, with your stellium and that Sagittarian stuff in Gemini, especially with your gender planet and your moon and with Mercury, the idea of the idea becomes the ideal. And in terms of Heartbreak Hotel, as far as following music, it would have been very easy for you to have a broken heart about this devotional loyalty in affiliation with relationships. Now, and that's, I look at directly connected with your Pluto in the 1st house in a conjunction to the angle itself. Because it's been my experience that anyone that's got Pluto in the 1st house, especially if it's near the ascendant itself, there's a lengthy latency of developmental expression. So part of the inquiry of what Pluto represents is the salient details underneath. It's like, it can't be a nice car. It can't be a good job. It can't be a handsome face. And all of a sudden you go, oh, I'm disillusioned. Well, then that's the disappointing part of this Mars and Pisces, because actually there's not a lot of people who would appreciate your sense of devotional loyalty. Now, you mentioned that you're a single mother. So most likely, though, that sense of devotional loyalty generated very well to your children. And they appreciated mom's strength, even if nobody else did. So that's the thought I wanted to share with you.
Thank you.
Stephen, I'm always amazed at your analysis in last time and this time.
Oh, let me add
I think
one thought. One more thought, because Patricia, you made a reference about your conjunction of Neptune to the sun. She said, I kind of walk in a daydream. Well, I looked at your birthday, and you were just born, but you're living in England and London in particular. David Bowie's album, Ziggy Stardust, that one song, Moon Age Daydream. So I thought of that particularly in relationship to your gender planet and Mercury and your moon there in Sagittarius, that 3rd house. I go, oh, why? If she checks the lyrics of David Bowie's Moon Age Daydream, you'd have that little sardonic smile. And you go, oh my gosh, I was born the year and he made that song, and it was just about me. so yeah, I just want to add that dull David Bowie part for you.
Wow, that's something. I mean, the Pluto thing, the Sagittarius thing, everything was, I think, very, very deeply kind of, you joined the dots very well, as usual. You have a powerful Gemini Sagittarius talent for reading charts, Stephen. And this is, I really wanted to tell you that while we are, because we only have a chance to speak during the sessions. And you've been on my sessions for a while now, and every time you just say a few words, but it's totally deep and spot on. Thank you for that. I hope it made sense to you, Patricia. But yeah, there is something I wanted to mention, which I totally forgot, and we already a little bit over time. So maybe I should just thank you all for today. And yes, oh yeah, okay. Let me just say that because it came back. And it's again another common thing, which I think you were very spot on, Stephen. Something about Neptune, because this chart, Mars is so mixed up with Neptunian themes, and in mine too, but just out of experience mentioning, I think you were very aware that Neptune related to the Mars, related to the Sun, and the Saturn participation in the whole thing as well, could lead to disappointments or disillusionment. Yeah, usually there is a sense of luck where Neptune is, and because here there is so much Neptune, including with the Sun, there might be the reason why you don't feel very motivated to act, if you see what I mean. I think there is a sense of there is no point, not just because we're dreamy and we're daydreaming because we're Neptunian in general, in a creative way, but there is more to that. And usually when we're talking about the Scorpio chart, in my case, in your case, there is an element of something is too hard to be accepted, and because it's not the way we imagined it would like to be, there is this ideal, and the ideal wasn't realized, and life showed that there is a big discrepancy between the ideal and reality. Then the person gets discouraged to continue the journey and just goes with the flow and just kind of goes with whatever happens. And this is something that I think is the task to try to heal that, basically, because that's a self-destructive tendency. It's a very, very it's almost like a dead wish. I recently discovered, even though I'm young and things on the surface might appear to be good in my life currently, but I also suffer from that death wish kind of syndrome, which is Neptune square Mars and something Neptunian in the mix with the Scorpio Sun. Yeah, that's a recipe for that sort of thing. So I suspect you might be going through that as well. And Chiron now is a opportunity, the Chiron return, to reverse the trend, to find new meaning, to to understand things for yourself, and to see that there is a point, actually. We just don't see it clearly enough. All right, enough philosophizing. I hope that was helpful for you in one way or another. And again, thank you so much, everybody. You're going to get the recording maybe tomorrow or on Monday. And yeah, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I hope you join me again. Next time, it will be Mercury. So I'm going to be focusing on that part of Mercury, which is to do with mental games, manipulation, playing with the mind, twisting the mind, things like this. And I just noticed earlier today that while we have that meeting, we're gonna still be under the Mercury retrograde. So hopefully that'll be a good moment to talk about this and see some
Hopefully there'll
charts.
be no communication issues.
Well, we see the internet stabilized again today, so I'm very happy that I wasn't so much sabotaged by the internet as I was last time. So that's at least good. And yeah, thank you very much. It's been a very, very heavy and very hot day here in Valencia for me. And while we were talking with you, now started raining for the first time in months. So I'm going to go and enjoy a bit of freshness now. Have a good evening, everybody. And thank you very much again. I'll see you next time. You get an invitation.
Thank you, Radilina. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.